Betsy, thank you so much for speaking with us today. We're really looking forward to this conversation. I wonder if you could start out by introducing yourself, telling us a little bit about you and about Trender.
Sure. Thanks, Mitch, and thanks for having me on the show. I have a background. It's kind of varied, but came up through the engineering ranks and then went over to product and mostly focused in the data and API management space. Also did some turns, obviously going into product with product management in marketing. So today I'm co-founder of Trender.ai, and what we're trying to enable is what we call human-to-human prospect intelligence, right? So when you think about prospecting or engaging with a buyer, really having good information at your fingertips, not just, kind of the demographic information we talk about, but insights around, who is Betsy? What's most important to her? How is she, like, as far as her personality, tone, and style? And then we help sales folks and marketing people generate personalized content based on those insights that we have on those prospects.
Great. Thank you for that. So I've got a few questions that I want to get into, and we'll see where these take us. And the first question is about this notion of the dark side, and just kind of your understanding of what that is, and especially what would you define this notion of dark funnel as? It sounds really cool, but what does it mean in your world?
Yeah, so there's a lot of debate about that, right? So I think for me, that dark funnel is when we think about, you're putting out content, or maybe I've even sent a cold email to you, Mitch, and maybe it has a funny video or something like that, right? And then that gets passed along. So maybe you're not interested, but you're sending it to me, or at the same company, or maybe it's a colleague of yours, and we don't really know, we don't have no attribution of where that comes from, right? And that happens a lot, right? You passing around LinkedIn posts and things like that. So for me, dark funnel is really about, I'm creating brand. I have some thought leadership, I have some content out there, and we can debate what that is, but it's getting passed around, and it's going in a lot of places that we have no idea where it's going, and we don't know who it's going to, but all of a sudden now these people are coming, and maybe they're a hot lead, or we actually close a deal with them, right? But there's no way, and I'm, as a buyer, I'm not going to say to you, oh yeah, well, Mitch sent me this LinkedIn post from 8 months ago, right? I mean, I might not even remember that that's what tipped me off, right? If that makes sense.
So why is this important for sales and marketing to focus on? I mean, as long as they're getting the business, why should they care?
Yeah, so another really good question. And again, there's a lot of, I would almost say there's almost kind of a religious debate about this, right? So it's like, what came first, the chicken or the egg, right? And it goes back, for me, it goes back to, kind of the perennial thing about branding, right? So, if you're not out there and people don't know who you are, then how are they going to come to you, right? And I think there's also, it's important because people are not, how do I say this? We're all doing a lot of research, right? So we want to have comfort in the things that we're buying, right? And so I don't think like a cold email or having a conversation in a booth, sometimes that is enough, but most of the time it's not, right? So I, as a buyer, I'm doing research, right? And if I'm hearing about you, and other people are talking about you, or I'm seeing posts from you and there's a lot of comments and engagement, so on and so on and so forth, then that's going to give me a lot more comfort about possibly considering you for purchase, right? So I think people tend to discount this, right? Because there isn't linear attribution, right? So, well, why are we doing these TikTok videos? Or, why do we have to write these use case, use cases are old school. I'm aging myself, but, why are we doing these particular things that I can't, say, okay, because we put out this, set of videos, the thought leadership series, I can't say, oh, we got 50 sales from that, right? And so this is something that, I've personally had to have a lot of these debates, and arguments and peppery conversations, right, about spending money and doing them. But I can tell you, and I've had this happen in the past, particularly at one company, we decided, okay, well, we're spending all this money and we're not getting any quote value, right? We literally could not track back from these activities. And this was back in the day too, when like it was like sponsoring events, right? And so we pulled back on all that for like 8 or 9 months. And I got to tell you, it did have an impact, a big impact, right? Because people, we had been out there and then people were like, is the company in trouble? It also created a vacuum for our competitors to really get in there, right? So it's important, right? But it is a struggle to really get people to understand the value of that, because I can't, I'm spending a lot of money and I can't directly tie that to particular sales. But what I will say is you'll watch all those boats rise with the tide, or you'll anecdotally start to see problems, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you don't do it. So
yeah, you pull that one thing out and everything starts dropping. There's your sign.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's an expensive way to test.
Yeah, yes. In this one case, it was real. And I will say in this one case, the aftermath of it was tough, right? Because we had, talk about the cleanup, right? Because there were rumors going around, in this particular circumstance that maybe our company was in trouble. Right. So now, not only am I starting from zero, I'm starting from like -10, right? Because I've got to clean up the mess of that plus, right? So, and I'll speak also from, founding a startup, right? We have the issue of, well, nobody ever heard of Trender.ai, so who are you? Right. And, you just can't send an email out anymore or call people and say, hey, well, we have this great platform for human to human intelligence. Do you want to buy it? And people are like, what? I haven't seen you anywhere. Right. So I think that also the buying climate has changed, right? Because there's so much information online and it's so cheap to do it. Right. And there's so many different ways, like, why wouldn't you? Right. And people, I think the buyer also expects it. They expect your company to have a point of view. They expect your company to have some kind of thought leadership position. And, it's, posting on LinkedIn it costs zero, right? You know what I mean? If you really think about it, right? So, yeah, so it's important.
So, Betsy, I know you are, your company markets to sales and marketing teams.
Yes.
So, and, sales and marketing, I think probably particularly marketing, is always looking at data to help them target better, close better, speed up their, the selling process. And the reality for most marketers and sales leaders is that data is probably sitting in multiple separate platforms. It's in their marketing automation, it's in their CRM, it's in who knows what all. So when you're talking to these folks, what are some of the challenges or complaints you hear from those marketers and salespeople about having to hunt down what they need across multiple systems in their environment?
Yeah, so I would say that tool fatigue is probably the number one complaint that we hear, right? So, and I think anybody who's listening to this is a sales marketing person, you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It takes you 6 tools to get anything accomplished, and then there's little pieces of data in all 6 of them, and trying to wash through all those different dashboards and reports to actually come to a conclusion about something is really, really annoying. So I would say, that's problematic. I would say the other thing is to, sometimes it's the time, right? So it's very manual process, right? To get that data or to be able to accomplish those things, right? And not all of those tools integrate with each other. So I would say that's the number one complaint. I would say that the secondary complaint, which is, it's a really, really hard environment to sell in today, right? It's a really hard environment to market in today, right? So people, I could open up my spam folder and I could show you hundreds of emails I get a week, right? And they all have similar subject lines. I don't have the time, and my LinkedIn inbox is just as bad now, right? So, and I think so in addition to the tool fatigue, it's like everybody's doing the same thing. And so how do I break through that? Right. And, how do I get through that? And then I'm dealing with, SCRs who are coming in and they need training, and how does that work? How do I make them most effective? Right. So it's just kind of this, I don't know, this mess right now of we've got lots of tools. We have lots of tools that do the same thing. We have frameworks that everybody is kind of jumping on the bandwagon. So for me as a buyer, it's like, well, you know what, I mean, I'm even getting a lot of emails now with the videos in them, right? And so that's not catnip for me anymore. It's like, oh, here's another people, like just delete. So you have that, and then you have, the reps who are not, not being effective, right? And so, the complaint is that one, there's tool fatigue, but two, we're not able to break through. We can't figure out how to break through, and, more is not more in this case, right? So, if I'm sending out 40 cold emails a day, well, maybe if I do 400, like there's this kind of law of numbers thing that people are thinking is going to work, but it's not working, right? So less than a 1% open rate is not, at some point you're going to run out of people to spam, right? And then what do you do, right? And then there's the whole brand issue as well. So I would say that's like the tool fatigue, I think the fatigue of the buyer and the sophistication of the buyer, and then, how do I empower salespeople to get through, right? Because it's very demoralizing, right? After a while, if you can't make quota, right, then you kind of just give up.
So one of the things I just heard you allude to is, there's so much noise to cut through.
Yeah.
And the notion of creating, useful quality content to attract those buyers at a breakthrough, I think is being devalued quickly as well, because creating content is now astronomically easier and faster than it used to be.
Yeah.
Hello, generative AI.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
So, what are you seeing as the way that companies are having success breaking through, and getting into substantive conversations with buyers?
Yeah, so there's a few things, and it's kind of funny because some of this is going full circle, right? So what's old is new again, right? So the emphasis on human relationships, right? So if Mitch, if you're a CTO and I'm trying to sell you, say, a cybersecurity product, I'm going to actually go and try and find out who Mitch is. I also need to be very expert in my cybersecurity product. Who is Mitch as a CTO? What is the CTO concerned about? Right. So really understanding your ICP, right? So and then being able, you're going to break through. The other thing that we're seeing from a trend pattern is, right, so generative AI generates a lot of, honestly, crap, right? I mean, and it's lazy. And so, and even from a marketing standpoint, it's like, I mean, if I see, the 5 best ways to write a cold email, I mean, I see this probably 20 times a day in my LinkedIn feed, right? Like, okay, so nothing new here. But if I'm coming back to you with a very short message or a very short email that is absolutely, look, I know about my cybersecurity product. I know the industry issues. I know who you are as a CTO and what you might be concerned about. I know that you at your company maybe have just acquired a new company, right? So now I have a whole new set of systems as a CTO. I got to worry about cybersecurity, right? So if I can craft this message that is short and pithy and really strikes you between the eyes of like, yes, this is timely for me and not waste my time, that we're hearing from people that breaks in, right? So, our own head of growth, he's getting anywhere from like a 35 to 63% open rate on those messages, right? So it's short, sweet, to the point, and it's relevant, right? But that requires work, right? That's hard. All the things that I just talked about as a rep or as a marketing person requires that I need to know and understand these things, right? And that generative AI is it's going to get you maybe 40 or 50% there, right? But generative AI is also generic, right? So that's the problem.
So and it's also not going away, and it's
Yeah.
spreading
Right.
super fast. So given that, maybe we could shift a little bit to talk about, AI, especially generative AI, is just spreading really fast. It won't solve all your problems, but it's probably good for some things, and probably a lot more things that we haven't thought of yet.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm curious about your perspective on that. Where should companies be looking at adopting Gen AI without drowning themselves and their prospects in a sea of mediocrity?
Yeah, and it's a really good question. I mean, and it's kind of ironic because we actually use those components of AI in our own platform. So what I'm going to say is first is that people need to understand that generative AI is really good at aggregation, right? And so, if I'm going out, we'll continue to use my cybersecurity example, right? So if I go out to, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and I start asking, well, what are the common issues in cybersecurity today? Well, it's got this huge database of information about that. It's very good at aggregating and summarizing that, right? But it doesn't have a point of view per se, if that makes sense, right? So generative AI, I think, is really, really good for that kind of like, and I'm speaking outside of what we do as a platform, but if I'm a marketing person, right, it helps shorten some of that research time, right? So if I went out there and said, hey, we want to go to a new market and for our cybersecurity products, and let's say we're going to do it in manufacturing, generative AI is really good for me to ask those questions because it's going to summarize and aggregate information that would be humanly impossible for me to do that research, right? So it definitely shortens that horizon. But the con of that is that I'm like, oh wow, that's so cool, and it was so powerful, and I don't have any curiosity behind that because it, and that's where I think people get in the danger zone of not having a point of view or not taking one of those threads and then like actually going deeper with it, right? So that's where I would use it. We use it like in market research. We use it in, can I quickly get an understanding of, industry topics, things like that. So I'll also say that it helps jumpstart content, but again, this is where people get lazy, right? Is, it can make this very nice formatted, article, but again, it's like cookie cutter stuff, right? And it's very generic. And so you're not telling me anything new. And this is where, again, I would use it as nobody likes to open up the Word doc with a blinking cursor. But but again, it's that pro and con, right? So I would use it to generate content. One of the things that we're building is, hey, let's here's your company, here's your industry. Let's understand what all those issues are and would be interesting to this company, say in this particular regulatory environment, and then give me some suggestions of content that you could possibly write. And so we want to, in our prototype, we're generating content. And we're very specific about like, okay, I want to create a blog that's 500 words and looks like this, right? I would say that that's the other kind of, again, it can help with if you want to have a particular writing style or if you want to have consistency, right? So there's, there's pros and cons to it, right? And I think I'm meandering on this, but I think you know where I'm going to mention. So I apologize. It's a long answer.
No matter how slick the output from your generative AI, you still need somebody with substantial knowledge and experience to look at that and be able to inject a point of view or to pick the things that are interesting and discard those that are not.
Right. And I think it also depends on the kind of marketing that you're doing, right? So let's talk realistically what people do, right? So at the very, very top, right? I'm trying to get people to come in, right? I don't, I think a lot of marketers would agree with me. It's too time consuming for me to handcraft these articles, right? This is always, and you're nodding because right? So if this is where generative AI can now help, right? It's like, okay, well, if I can create a carousel of 20 interesting point of view or articles about this, right? And yes, it's easy for one marketing person to kind of cruise through, do some editing or make sure there's some brand tone, but then I can use this carousel, right? That's something where, generative AI is really, really handy. And, I'm talking like I'm trying to get out there and create this very top of funnel, right? Same thing with emails, right? So I want to have a little bit of personalization. This has been kind of, difficult to do at scale. And it's more than, oh, hi, Betsy, or hey, we both like soup, right? Like it's not like that. But, if there's a way, and this is, I'm pitching a little bit of our platform, but this is another way to think about this is if there's a way that we know, okay, we can bring it down to, here's this industry, here's this regulatory environment or something around cybersecurity, and here's Betsy, right? And this is what's important to her. I can create personalization, generative AI can create personalization and what we call at scale, right? So if you think about using a sequencing app, or campaign, and I have these dynamic fields in my email or my messages, and I can open with, hey, Betsy, I noticed you're CTO at this company, and this regulatory environment just happened around cybersecurity. We do this. Is this something you'd be interested in having a chat in, right? It can help with that, right? So I don't have to handcraft everything. And at some point, when we're talking really top of funnel where something becomes SQL, before that, right, you're kind of getting this stuff. And at some point, something's going to break through and I'm going to go, Uncle, okay, I'll take the meeting, right? Or, oh, actually, now I do have a situation where I do need to buy. I've seen all your stuff. I have a point of view. You guys seem to understand who I am, so I'll take that meeting, right? So if that makes sense, that's where it can help, where I'm really trying to do stuff at volume. But I think you need to understand that I'm doing things at volume, right? I'm not, this is not where, this would not work in a situation where, say, I'm a venture capital person, I'm trying to raise a fund, and I'm hand picking very high net worth individuals. I don't think people like that would appreciate a bunch of these like generative AI emails going to them, right? So, hopefully that makes sense. But there's, for me, it's like I would say super helpful in the pre sales qualified lead. But you want to think very carefully about that once you get into an SQL and move down the funnel to a sale.
Yeah. So, what about the risk of as these tools get adopted more and more? What the risk of lots of companies doing similar things or sounding the same? Does it then make the differentiation harder?
Yes and no, right? So, I have a pretty strong point of view on this that, lazy people are going to do lazy things, right? I mean, so, AI, let's talk about email, right? Let's talk about email today, right? Right. People spam with all kinds of bad generic messages that AI has nothing to do with, right? So I think any tool in the hands of people who are kind of lazy, generic, I don't know, press for time and good enough, you're going to have that issue, right? So yeah, I mean, it takes work, right? So one of the things that I'll tell you is, we had to spend a lot of time crafting prompts in a way that create, for us, we create icebreakers and messages that at least, they don't look generic, right? But that's a lot of work that, me and another, data scientist spent weeks on prompting again and again and again, right? And I just don't know that your average bear, marketing person is going to take the time, because it's almost like you literally are programming, if that makes sense, right? And I think that's a little bit of the fallacy of ChatGPT and Gen AI. So I think you're going to have a lot of people who aren't going to take that time. I think there's going to be a lot of companies that, because they want to get to market quickly, because this is a fad, they aren't going to take the time, right? And yeah, you're going to get a whole bunch of generic stuff. But I think, people who take the time, or the companies who are really crafting something unique, then I think Gen AI could be interesting and it could break through, right? But it's really, it's going to depend. So I know that's kind of a non-answer, but right.
No, it's actually a very good answer. So we've kind of gone down this path of thinking about how marketers and sales leaders will be using AI in the in the coming months and years. And I think that, as I said, a lot of those things maybe we haven't even thought of yet. Um, if you look at the kind of landscape out there now and how things are going, where do you see things going? Where do you think the big shifts are going to happen over the next year as a result of the proliferation of these Gen AI tools?
Yeah. So I'll talk about kind of where Gen AI would fit and kind of what kind of tools I think would go better. And then I think maybe just kind of the industry, because there's a lot of tools, and everybody's making an announcement about Gen AI and everything, right? So it's kind of like, remember when IoT came out, and it was like, oh, your toothbrush, and it was like everywhere, right? So there's a really big hype cycle right now. But I think Gen AI and AI in general is going to be much more helpful in, because again, it's really good at summarizing, aggregating, right, and summarizing. I think it's going to be good at picking out patterns, right? So one place that we've been doing a lot of exploration where, if you think about all the data that you have in your CRM, so I'll use one good example here, right? So let's talk about, Mitch, I know you know this. Can you tell me what your ideal opportunity profile, right? How many times have we had this initiative, right? Executives, oh, we need to go through our CRM and figure out, these 5 steps happened and these people bought in this time frame, and this is our best buyer, right? Like, what is that ideal persona look like, right? And that's really hard right now today to flush all that through CRM to say, okay, well, the person who typically buys, they spend this much time on our website, they come back these many times, they open this email that looked like this, right? So there's a whole pattern of behavior. I think that that's something that, if you think about putting all of that CRM data in an LLM, right now you've got your Gong and course transcripts, and you can do sentiment and all these things, that could be a very interesting area for somebody to come in, and generative AI to come in and say, hey, you know what, based on all of this data that we have, and all this patterning and everything else we can find, A, your ideal opportunity profile looks like this, but B, and more importantly, is here are the 100 people in your database that you're not paying attention to. They fit this profile. If you're going to open up your contacts in HubSpot today, here's the 5 people that match this. You should be going after them, right? And I think that could be very, very exciting, right? I think it can be exciting in kind of generating this content with people think about it more of, okay, what's the current industry thing going on? What's going on with these companies? And now create content that could be, much more personalized and more interesting at an industry and company level, right? So I'm not worrying about, okay, is this going to be personally interesting to Mitch? But Mitch is a CTO, he's in this industry, he's aware of these things, so he's probably going to read this, right? So I think those are the 2 places where it could be very, very exciting. The other thing that I think could be extremely exciting is GPT or OpenAI just released this feature that I can create avatars of myself, right? So I can create an avatar of Mitch, I can create an avatar of Betsy. So if you think of the potential of that, right, I can create avatars of my top leads or people at my top deals, right? And then I can start playing messages off of them back and forth to say, is this going to resonate? Is this going to resonate? Right. That could be very interesting. Now I'm kind of getting a little more sci-fi type stuff, but you know what I mean? Like, or if you think about, and again, this is something that we're playing with in an R&D standpoint, is if Mitch is my best salesperson, so let's go back, right? Okay. Oh, Mitch is our best salesperson. You know, how do we clone Mitch, right? Mitch is going to go train everybody, right? You need to be like Mitch. We all know that's a disaster area, right? Because you kind of have the Stepford wives of sales, and that doesn't work either, right? So, but if I could create an avatar of Mitch, and then if I understood and was able to layer over Betsy Bilhorn's personality on top and create this like Betsy, who's the most amazing sales, who has channeled her inner Mitch, right? Think about that. And then that could, you know, write messages, right? So again, now I'm really going off into like some super sci-fi stuff, but that's where I think you can have some really interesting potential there. I think from an industry perspective, right, you know, we've already talked about tool fatigue, and everybody and their mom is putting in Gen AI into everything, right? I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation. I think there's going to be a lot of collapsing of that, right? So there's a lot of people when, you know, GPT 3.5 came out, rocked everybody's world, right? It was like immediate, oh, we've got, you know, an AI chatbot, right? I think a lot of that's going to start to flush out and go away, right? Because there's just, you know, it's hard. I think the thing that people don't really understand, and, you know, I don't mean to insult anybody, but we're all really busy at work, and, you know, kind of your average bear person is not going to spend hours figuring out how to prompt, right? So I do see another industry kind of growing is, you know, either a services industry or, you know, someplace where you buy the stuff or you have consultants or whatever, but people who are doing prompt engineering, right? So, you know, Mitch, you own a business. I come in, I got my team of prompt engineers. We really try to understand what you're trying to do. We know how to like work with, you know, GPT-4 and create these amazing prompts for you, right? I just don't see the 80% of marketing and sales people doing that, right? So I think there could be a whole new industry around prompt engineering and services helping businesses really leverage Gen AI in whatever way they're going to do that.
The ability to precisely frame what it is you want is, yeah, super valuable. Gives hope to many of those English majors out there who are wondering what the heck their degree is good for. Well, precise language is pretty important. So, well, Betsy, this has been extremely valuable and interesting to me, and I'm sure to everyone who's listening. Thank you so much for taking us through this and giving us a little better understanding. And yeah, we'll talk to you soon.
Thank you so much, Mitch. It was a pleasure. Thank you.